Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God, yes I am.
Scripture today is from John chapter 2, verses 1 through 11, page 1649 in your Pew Bible. On the third day, a wedding took place at Cana in Galilee, and Jesus' mother was there. And Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, "They have no more wine." "Woman, why do you involve me?" Jesus replied. "My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you to." Nearby stood 6 stone water jars, the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding from 20 to 30 gallons. Jesus said to the servants, "Fill the jars with water." So they filled them to the brim. Then he told them, "Now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet." They did so, and the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine. He did not realize where it had come from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. Then he called the bridegroom aside and said, "Everyone brings out the choice wine first, and then the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink. But you have saved the best till now." What Jesus did here in Cana of Galilee was the first of the signs through which he revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him.
Thank you, Shelley. Many of you know Joe Vaggart. Joe is retired from a distinguished career with the Kansas Highway Patrol. And as you can imagine, over the years, Joe's had a lot of interesting encounters with people, a lot of interesting conversations with lots of folks. And so here's a story. Joe said that one day he was patrolling the highway, and he noticed a car that was swerving all over the road. And so he pulled it over, and as he approached the driver's side window, he was a little bit taken aback by the fact that it was a priest. It was a Roman Catholic priest, complete with collar. And he thought, well, you know, the law is the law, right? So the priest rolls his window down, and Joe said, "Sir, you are driving very erratically back there. Have you been drinking?" And the priest was a little taken aback himself. He said, "No, sir, not at all." And Joe glanced around in the car, and he saw a cup there, and he said, "Well, what's in that cup there?" He said, "Oh, that's just water." And he said, "Well, can I have that?" And so he hands it to Joe, and Joe pops open the lid, and he sniffs it. He says, "Sir, this isn't water. This is wine." And the priest said, "Well, praise Jesus, he did it again." That's not a true story. That didn't happen at all. But this story really did happen. I mean, the miracle that inspired that joke really did take place in a real town called Cana. And I know it's real because I've been there. A few years ago, about 8 years ago, a group of us from the church had the privilege of going to Israel, and one of the places we visited was Cana. And so here's a picture of some of us standing outside a church building that's built on the site of the traditional site where it's believed that this miracle took place. Basically, everywhere in Israel that they think a miracle happened, they build a church there. And so that's some of us standing outside that church. The next picture is a picture of us inside, and there are a number of married couples with us on the trip, and they wanted to renew their wedding vows at the wedding chapel in Cana. I mean, what could be a better wedding venue, right, than that? And so then the question was, well, who's going to officiate the ceremony? And then the discussion went something like, well, who's the most godly and Christ-like person among us? Actually, my wife didn't go on the trip. I don't let her go on trips like that. No, and she wasn't there, and so it fell to me. And so I'm officiating the ceremony. It kind of looks a little bit like a cult, doesn't it? Like a mass wedding. If you look carefully, pardon me, you might see Pastor Jeff in the back corner, and obscured there is Julie. And in the more the foreground, you see Roy and Linda May. Anyway, so there we are, and Jesus is over my right shoulder. And so we're having the wedding ceremony there in Cana. The city of Cana, the town of Cana, is approximately 4 miles northeast of Nazareth, which is important in this story because you remember that Jesus was from Nazareth. He grew up there. And we even see some indication in the story that there's some tension, some rivalry between these two small towns. And so anyway, he only is a few miles away from there, grew up, and that might explain why they have friends there in Cana. Verse 1 says that Jesus' mother is at the wedding. Verse 2 says that Jesus and his disciples are also there. That's interesting because we're told in John 21 that Nathanael, one of Jesus' disciples, was from Cana. Nathanael, that was his hometown. That might help explain why he and the other disciples had been invited. Verse 12, the verse just after our passage, indicates that his brothers were there as well. Jesus has 4 brothers and at least 2 sisters. And so I think we can assume safely that Jesus alone brings at least 20 guests to this wedding. Now, right away, Mary approaches Jesus with a crisis. There's no more wine. They have run out of wine. Now, for us, that might not seem like a major crisis. That might represent for us a minor logistical problem. Where's the nearest liquor store? That kind of thing. In our culture, to run out of a beverage at a party might be embarrassing, but it would not be devastating. But that's the thing. That's the difference in our cultures. Jesus and his people live in what's called an honor-shame culture. And I don't know how much you know about how that works. But in this culture, this is not just about the wine. This is about the family honor, the family name. This could bring shame and disgrace to entire families for generations. Now, since we don't live in an honor-shame culture, it's difficult for us to grasp the gravity of the situation for them. But let me just say, this is a really big deal for these folks. Now, if Joseph were still alive, she would no doubt have consulted him. But he's gone, and so the family leadership falls to the eldest son, to Jesus. So Mary comes to Jesus with great urgency. They have no more wine. She seems to expect him to do something, right? I mean, she's coming to him. Now, I don't think she's probably expecting him to do a miracle because presumably she's never witnessed anything like that before. And Jesus' response, a little jarring, he says, "Woman, why do you involve me? My hour has not yet come," verse 4. Now, in our modern English, in our cultural context, Jesus' response sounds rude, doesn't it? But in the Hebrew, I assure you, it's not disrespectful at all. It's merely formal. Jesus uses this phrase, this language, this title to talk to many women throughout the Gospels in public. So it's just a formal way of addressing